On February 8, something uncommon has taken place in the spiritual realm, and this is not a random message crossing your path. This date carries weight, not because of calendars made by man, but because of movements initiated in heaven. Earlier today, your name was mentioned in a place most people never consider, the courts of heaven. This is not symbolic language meant to impress you. This is a spiritual reality meant to awaken you. When Archangel Michael speaks, it is never casual. He is not a messenger of noise, but of urgency, protection, and divine command. And today, his message is clear. Heaven is aware of you, and God himself is watching closely to see how you will respond to what you are hearing right now. There are moments when heaven speaks generally, and there are moments when heaven speaks personally. This is the latter. The mention of a name in heaven is not done lightly. Scripture shows us that names are connected to assignments, destinies, and covenants. When your name is spoken before God, it signals attention, evaluation, and movement. Something about your life, your prayers, your endurance, or even your silence has risen upward. And today, February 8 marks a moment where that cry was acknowledged. This is why this message feels different. This is why something in you feels alert, even if you cannot fully explain it. Archangel Michael does not appear for entertainment. He appears in moments of spiritual conflict, transition, and decision. His presence signals that there is more happening behind the scenes than what your natural eyes can see. There has been activity around your destiny, resistance, delays, and quiet battles you did not even know were occurring. Yet heaven has not been passive. Your name being mentioned is evidence that you are not overlooked, forgotten, or insignificant. It is proof that God has been watching the details of your life more closely than you realize. What makes this moment even more serious is not just that heaven spoke your name, but that God is now observing your response. There are seasons where God carries you, and seasons where God calls you to move. This message is not simply meant to comfort you. It is meant to confront you with a decision. Will you treat this as just another video, another voice, another coincidence? Or will you recognize that you are standing at the edge of a spiritual intersection where response matters? February 8 stands as a line in the sand. Not because something bad is coming, but because something is being offered. Divine attention always comes with divine expectation. God watches closely not to judge harshly, but to see whether his voice is still honored in your heart. Heaven is attentive right now because obedience in this moment unlocks what has been delayed for far too long. There are doors that cannot open without a response. There are answers that remain sealed until acknowledgement is given. You may not feel ready. You may feel tired, uncertain, or hesitant. But heaven does not wait for perfection. It waits for willingness. Archangel Michael's message carries urgency because timing matters. Delayed obedience often looks harmless, but spiritually it can shift seasons. God is patient, yes, but moments like this are invitations that do not repeat endlessly. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to awaken you. Notice how you did not search for this message. It found you. Notice how the words are landing with weight rather than noise. That is not emotional manipulation. That is recognition. Something in your spirit knows this moment is important. Heaven is close. God is attentive. And your response, even now, is being observed, not to condemn you, but to confirm your alignment. This part of the message is about awareness. Before instruction comes understanding. Before movement comes recognition. You are being made aware that your life is under divine observation in a positive sense. God is not distant. He is not distracted. He is watching closely because he is involved. And when God watches closely, it means something is about to change. but only if you respond. As this message continues, things will become clearer. The reason your name was mentioned will unfold. The role of Archangel Michael in your situation will be revealed. And the response God is looking for will no longer feel confusing. But it begins here, with acknowledgement. This is not a message to rush past. This is a moment to receive fully. Because what happens next is connected to what you do with what you have just heard. And now that you understand the gravity of what has taken place, it is important to address the question quietly forming in your heart. Why you? Why would heaven pause, and why would your name rise among so many voices on the earth? This is not about favoritism. It is about recognition. Heaven responds to alignment, endurance, and sincerity, often long before results appear on the outside. What you have been walking through is not gone unnoticed. The moments when you kept going without applause, the prayers you whispered instead of shouted, the faith you held on to when logic told you to let go, these are not small things in the eyes of God. Heaven pays attention when a soul remains standing in seasons meant to break them. Many people talk about faith when life is easy. Few remain faithful when answers are delayed. Something in your journey signaled authenticity. It may have been your refusal to harden your heart. It may have been your quiet repentance, your humility, or your persistence when others walked away. These are the kinds of spiritual markers that register beyond the natural realm. This is how heaven distinguishes noise from truth. There are patterns God watches for. Not perfection, but posture. Not loud declarations, but consistent direction. Your life has shown a pattern of seeking, even when confused. Of believing, even when uncertain. Of holding on to hope, even when disappointed. That pattern is what drew attention. When your name was mentioned, it was not to highlight your flaws, but to acknowledge your trajectory. Heaven is less concerned with where you are and more concerned with where you are facing. You may feel ordinary, even overlooked in the natural world. But spiritually, there hath been a spotlight on your decisions. There were moments when you could have compromised and did not. Moments when you could have grown bitter and chose restraint instead. Those choices echo louder in heaven than public success ever could. God sees motives before actions, intentions before outcomes. And that is why this message is reaching you now. This is also why there is a sense of closeness in what you are hearing. Heaven does not broadcast indiscriminately. This message is landing because it is meant to land. There is a spiritual audience observing your next steps, not in a threatening way, but in anticipation. Angels respond to instruction, and instruction follows obedience. Right now, heaven is attentive because your response will determine what is released next. This is where awareness turns into participation. You are not a passive observer of your destiny. You are a responder. God does not force alignment. He invites it. The fact that you are hearing this means the invitation has already been extended. What remains is engagement. Engagement is not just belief. It is acknowledgement. It is saying, even quietly, I hear you. And this is where I ask you to do something simple, but intentional. If this message is resonating with you, if something in your spirit feels seen, stirred, or awakened, take a moment to engage with it. Like this message as a sign of agreement. Subscribe if you feel connected to this flow, because what follows will build on what has already begun. And if you are willing, leave a comment that simply says, I receive this. These actions are not about a platform. They are about alignment. They are small outward responses that mirror an inward decision. Engagement matters more than people realize. When you acknowledge a message, you position yourself to receive what comes next. You are signaling readiness, not to a channel, but to yourself and to heaven. This is how faith becomes active rather than passive. This is how attention turns into movement. There is a reason this part of the message focuses on why heaven is paying attention. Understanding produces confidence. Confidence produces obedience. And obedience unlocks clarity. You are not being tested for information. You are being prepared for instruction. What comes next will require trust, but it will not come without explanation. God does not call blindly, He calls relationally. As you continue listening, you will begin to recognize patterns from your own life being reflected back to you. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. The more you lean in, the clearer it becomes that this moment was arranged. Heaven is not rushing you, but it is inviting you to move with awareness rather than delay. Your name was mentioned because your life has meaning beyond what you can currently see. And the attention you are receiving now is not pressure, it is positioning. Something is being set in order. Something is being prepared. And as this message unfolds, the reason for heaven's focus will become undeniable. There are moments in the spiritual realm that do not make headlines on earth, yet they carry eternal weight. One of those moments happened earlier today when your name was spoken in heaven. This is not poetic language. In Scripture, a name represents identity, authority, and assignment. When a name is mentioned before God, it signals that heaven is responding to something connected to that person's life. It means a record was opened. It means attention was focused. And it means movement began. When your name was spoken, it was not spoken in isolation. Heaven does nothing casually. Your name was connected to context, your prayers, your endurance, your questions, your tears, and even your moments of doubt. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was ignored. This was not about perfection, but about honesty. God does not respond to performance. He responds to truth. And something truthful about your heart reached Him. Many people pray, but not all prayers rise in the same way. Some prayers are routine. Others are desperate. And then there are prayers that are unspoken, carried in the heart when words no longer come easily. Those are often the ones that reach heaven with the greatest clarity. Your name being mentioned means one of those moments was seen. A moment when you chose not to quit. A moment when you whispered faith instead of giving in to fear. A moment when you kept going even though you felt unseen. Angels respond when God speaks a name. It signals direction. It signals responsibility. It signals that something is about to be activated. Archangel Michael's involvement confirms that this is not just about comfort, but about protection and readiness. There has been resistance around you, quiet resistance that tried to slow you down, distract you, or wear you out emotionally. Heaven noticed, and heaven responded. This is why this message feels personal. You are not overhearing something meant for someone else. You are being addressed. When your name was spoken, it marked a turning point. Not necessarily a dramatic overnight change, but a spiritual shift. A recalibration. A moment where heaven leaned in closer. That is what you are feeling now. The weight of being seen. It is important to understand that when heaven speaks a name, it is often followed by a question, not an accusation. The question is not, are you worthy? The question is, will you respond? God already knows your limitations. He is not surprised by your fears or your uncertainty. What He watches for is willingness. Will you acknowledge Him? Will you trust Him enough to move when clarity begins to unfold? This is where many people miss their moment. Not because they disbelieve, but because they delay. They wait for certainty before obedience, but heaven often releases certainty after obedience begins. Your name being mentioned means heaven is ready to move, but movement requires response. Even a small one, even a quiet one. Right now, you may feel a mixture of emotions, relief, curiosity, caution, even disbelief. That is normal. Divine moments often arrive without warning, but do not let familiarity dull the impact of this one. This is not just information. This is invitation. An invitation to step into alignment rather than observation. As you listen, something is happening beneath the surface. Awareness is turning into recognition. Recognition is turning into readiness. And readiness is preparing you for what comes next. There is more to be revealed, but it unfolds in stages. Heaven does not overwhelm. It guides. Before we go further, this is a moment to seal what has been spoken. Not with fear, but with faith. Not with noise, but with intention. Type "I am called" by name in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 417 is now activated. Take a breath here. Let this moment settle. What comes next will bring clarity to why this moment matters so deeply and how your response connects to what heaven is preparing. You'll be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. As this truth settles in your spirit, hear this clearly. When messages like this reach you, they are not meant to stop with you. God speaks so His light can travel further. Every seed sown into this mission becomes oil for another soul still searching in the dark. I feel led to say this directly to you. Your obedience in this moment can help heaven reach someone else's breaking point. Scripture comes alive here because God is saying, "As you sow, I will cause rivers to flow where there was drought." This message moves forward through those who respond, not just spiritually, but actively. If your heart is stirred, act now through super thanks, channel membership, with a PayPal link in the description or the QR code on screen. I release blessing over every giver. May what you release return as clarity, protection, and divine acceleration. Obey the nudge and let heaven multiply what you place in God's hands. When Archangel Michael is mentioned, heaven is signaling at this moment involves more than encouragement. It involves assignment. Michael is not dispatched for minor matters. He is known as a defender, a commander, and a guardian over God's purposes. His presence around your life right now reveals that something significant has been unfolding behind the scenes, something that required protection, authority, and intervention. This is not random. This is strategic. An assignment from Archangel Michael does not always look dramatic on the surface. Often, it manifests as quiet restraint over forces you never saw, delays that were actually protection, and pressure that did not break you even though it should have. You may have wondered why certain things did not collapse the way they could have, or why you were preserved in seasons that felt unbearable. That was not luck. That was coverage. Michael's assignment over your life is connected to safeguarding what God has planted in you. There is something within you, faith, purpose, calling, or direction, that carries weight in the spiritual realm. And where there is weight, there is resistance. The opposition you felt was not imagined. It was not simply emotional or circumstantial. There were moments when the pressure intensified because something valuable was being protected. This is why some battles felt exhausting even when nothing seemed to change outwardly. The fight was not always about what you could see. Heaven was intervening in ways that prevented greater harm, greater delay, or greater confusion. Archangel Michael's involvement signals that what you carry matters enough to defend. It is also important to understand that protection does not mean absence of struggle. It means the struggle is contained. You were allowed to grow without being destroyed. You were refined without being consumed. and you were kept standing even when answers were slow. That is the mark of divine oversight. Michael's assignment also involves readiness. Protection prepares the way for release. Heaven does not shield something indefinitely. It shields it until the timing is right. This is why the intensity has begun to shift. What once felt like constant resistance may now feel like anticipation. That is not accidental. That is transition. You are entering a phase where what has been guarded is preparing to move forward. This does not mean everything will suddenly be easy, but it does mean you are no longer fighting unseen battles alone. Heaven has already gone ahead of you. Boundaries have been set. Limits have been enforced. And access has been restricted where it needed to be. Another part of Michael's assignment is clarity. Confusion is one of the most common tools used to delay destiny. When clarity increases, movement follows. That is why you may notice your thoughts beginning to settle, your discernment sharpening, and your tolerance for distractions decreasing. These are signs that alignment is taking place. Archangel Michael's role is not to speak endlessly, but to enforce what God has already declared. This means that what God has spoken over your life is not being debated. It is being defended. Delays did not cancel it. Silence did not erase it. And opposition did not overpower it. You are not meant to fight every battle consciously. Some battles are fought on your behalf so that when you step forward, you can do so without fear. That is the season you are approaching now. A season where movement replaces maintenance, where direction replaces confusion, where courage replaces hesitation. This assignment also reveals responsibility. Protection is not given so that one can remain passive. It is given so that one can move forward without unnecessary fear. Heaven has done its part to guard, restrain, and prepare. Now awareness is being brought to you so that you can cooperate with what has already been set in motion. There may be areas of your life where you sensed you were being held back, not by failure but by timing. That timing is shifting. The assignment that was once focused on defense is gradually moving toward advancement, and that requires your attention. Archangel Michael's involvement confirms that this is not a small adjustment. It is a directional one. You are being repositioned. What once drained you will no longer have the same access. What once confused you will no longer hold the same power. And what once intimidated you will no longer feel as overwhelming. This part of the message is meant to bring reassurance. You are not walking into the unknown unprotected. You are stepping into a space that has already been prepared. Heaven has been active on your behalf longer than you realize. And as this message continues, the reason for this protection will become clearer. The next steps will begin to take shape, and the role you are meant to play will no longer feel distant or unreachable. What was guarded is now being revealed, and what was defended is now being positioned to move forward. There is a sacred tension that exists when God watches closely. It is not the tension of judgment, but the tension of anticipation. God is not observing you to find fault. He is observing to see whether your heart will move in alignment with what heaven has already initiated. This is the moment where awareness turns into responsibility. You have been made aware that your name was mentioned, that protection has been assigned, and now the focus shifts to response. Response does not always look dramatic. Often, it begins quietly, in the inner posture of the heart. God watches how you process what you hear. Do you dismiss it quickly, or do you sit with it? Do you rush back into distraction, or do you allow reflection to shape your next steps? Heaven notices these subtly. Obedience is rarely loud at first. It is usually internal before it becomes visible. There is a difference between hearing God and responding to God. Many people hear, but fewer respond. Hearing informs you. Responding aligns you. God is watching closely because alignment unlocks what information alone cannot. This is why some people accumulate spiritual knowledge yet remain stagnant. They hear, but they hesitate. They wait for comfort before movement, clarity before trust. But heaven often works in reverse order. Your response matters because it signals trust. Trust is not proven by words alone, but by willingness. Willingness to adjust. Willingness to release what no longer fits. Willingness to take a step without needing the entire path revealed. God does not require you to know everything. He requires you to follow faithfully. This is also where fear often attempts to speak louder. Fear asks questions meant to delay action. What if you misunderstand? What if nothing changes? What if you are disappointed again? These questions feel reasonable, but they are not always helpful. Heaven understands your concerns, but it also understands your capacity. God would not be watching closely if He did not believe you were capable of responding. There have been seasons where God carried you without asking much of you because you were still healing, learning, or recovering. This is different. This season invites participation, not perfection. Participation. God is not asking you to have everything figured out. He is asking you to acknowledge His involvement and to remain responsive as clarity unfolds. Sometimes response is as simple as shifting your priorities, making room for stillness, paying attention to what consistently draws your peace away, choosing obedience in small, seemingly insignificant decisions. Heaven measures faithfulness in these moments. Large breakthroughs are often preceded by quiet obedience that no one else sees. God is also watching how you handle timing. Impatience can rush what needs to mature. Hesitation can delay what is ready. Discernment keeps you balanced between the two. A discernment grows when you stay connected, attentive, and honest before God. You do not need to force outcomes. You need to remain open to instruction. This message is not about pressure. Pressure comes from striving. This is about positioning. Positioning yourself to receive direction when it comes. Positioning yourself to recognize opportunity when it appears. Positioning yourself to move when confirmation begins to align. God watches closely because He knows that once you respond, momentum will follow. There is also mercy in this watching. God does not turn away when you hesitate. He waits. He watches patiently, giving space for understanding to grow. But space does not mean stagnation. There comes a point where awareness demands movement, even if that movement is small. A prayer spoken differently. A boundary set firmly. A decision made with faith rather than fear. Your response is not measured against anyone else's journey. Comparison is irrelevant here. God is dealing with you personally, relationally, intentionally. What He asks of you fits your capacity, not someone else's calling. That is why this message feels specific rather than generic. As you continue to listen, notice what begins to rise in you. Not anxiety, but clarity. Not confusion, but resolve. Those are signals that response is already forming. God watches closely not to intimidate you, but to encourage movement at the right pace, in the right direction. This is a turning point not because something external is forcing change, but because something internal is being awakened. You are realizing that faith is not passive. It listens, and then it moves. And heaven is ready to move with you. The next part of this message will begin to show you how to recognize the signs that confirm you were meant to hear this today, and why timing plays such a crucial role in what is unfolding. The watching of God is not an ending. It is the beginning of alignment. There are signs that appear quietly when a moment is divinely arranged. They do not announce themselves loudly, yet they carry a familiarity that stirs recognition deep within you. These signs are not meant to impress others. They are meant to confirm you. One of the clearest indicators that you were meant to hear this message today is the way it arrived without effort. You did not plan this encounter. You did not search extensively for it. It met you where you were, in a moment that already carried questions, emotions, or reflection. That is how divine timing often works, subtle, precise, and personal. Another sign is the internal response you are experiencing. This message may not have answered every question, but it has touched something deeper than logic. There is a sense of recognition rather than surprise. Something in you is saying, "This connects," even if your mind is still processing why. That internal agreement is not emotional coincidence. It is spiritual awareness awakening. When God speaks into a moment prepared by Him, the Spirit recognizes it before the mind fully understands it. You may also notice patterns surrounding this timing. Repeated thoughts, recurring themes in your prayers, or situations that have recently resurfaced in your life. These are not interruptions. They are indicators. God often prepares the heart before He delivers clarity. What you have been wrestling with internally is not separate from this message. It is connected to it. The questions you've been carrying created space for this word to land. Another sign is the feeling of pause, a subtle slowing down. Even if your life remains busy, something in you feels momentarily still, attentive, listening. That pause is important. Heaven often creates stillness before direction. It is in that stillness that discernment sharpens. You begin to notice what resonates and what no longer fits. This awareness is not accidental, and is preparation. You may also sense a gentle urgency, not panic, not pressure, but awareness that this moment matters. That feeling is different from anxiety. Anxiety rushes. Divine urgency clarifies. It draws your attention without overwhelming you. It signals that timing is aligned, and that delaying acknowledgement could dull sensitivity. This does not mean you must act recklessly. It means you are invited to remain present and responsive. Another confirming sign is emotional honesty. You may find yourself more aware of what you have been suppressing: fatigue, hope, disappointment, desire. God often brings truth to the surface before He brings direction. This is not to expose you, but to free you. You cannot move forward carrying unspoken weight. Recognition is the first step toward release. You might also recognize that resistance has recently weakened. Things that once discouraged you no longer hold the same power. Distractions that once pulled you away feel less appealing. This shift is subtle, but significant. It indicates readiness. Heaven does not move when we are entangled in noise. It moves when clarity begins to rise. Timing plays a crucial role here. This message did not arrive too early or too late. It arrived when you were capable of hearing it. Even if you feel unsure, your awareness shows capacity. God does not speak prematurely. He waits until the heart can receive without being overwhelmed. That is why this moment feels weighty, but not crushing. There is also a reason this message comes after a season of endurance. Endurance refines discernment. You have learned the difference between noise and truth, between urgency and manipulation. That discernment allows you to recognize this message as an invitation rather than a demand. Heaven respects that growth. You may wonder why this confirmation is unfolding gradually rather than all at once. It is because clarity grows with trust. God reveals in layers to build confidence, not dependence. Each part of this message is designed to strengthen awareness so that when direction comes, you are grounded rather than reactive. If you find yourself reflecting more than usual, questioning less from fear and more from curiosity. That is another sign. Curiosity opens doors that fear keeps closed. It invites learning rather than retreat. Heaven responds well to curiosity because it signals openness. All of these signs together form a pattern, not a coincidence, a confirmation. You were meant to hear this today because your spirit was ready, your heart was prepared, and your timing aligned with heaven's movement. This does not mean everything will be clear immediately. It means clarity has begun. As you continue forward, pay attention to what consistently brings peace rather than noise. Peace is not absence of challenge, it is presence of alignment. That peace will guide your next steps more accurately than fear ever could. The next part of this message will uncover the test hidden within this moment. Not a test meant to intimidate you, but one designed to strengthen your trust and reveal the depth of your alignment. This is where awareness turns into discernment, and discernment begins to shape destiny. Within every divine moment, there is a test, but not the kind that is meant to expose weakness. This test is designed to reveal alignment. It is subtle, often overlooked, and deeply personal. It does not ask you to prove strength, it asks you to demonstrate trust. This is the test hidden inside this message, and understanding it changes how you respond to everything that follows. The test is not whether you believe that heaven spoke your name. Belief alone is not the measure here. The test is whether you will allow that truth to influence your posture, your decisions, and your patience. Many people accept spiritual ideas intellectually, but fewer allow those ideas to reshape how they live. This moment is quietly asking you which one you will be. This test often appears in the space between clarity and action. God has given you awareness, but He has not yet given you every detail. The gap is intentional. It is where trust is exercised. Will you remain open even when you do not yet see the full picture? Will you resist the urge to control the outcome? Will you stay attentive rather than distracted? These questions form the heart of the test. One of the most difficult aspects of this test is its simplicity. There is no dramatic challenge, no obvious obstacle. Instead, it shows up in daily choices. Will you make time to listen rather than rush? Will you respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally? Will you honor what you sense today when life returns to its normal pace? These are the quiet places where alignment is revealed. This test also touches obedience without explanation. Human nature prefers certainty before movement, but spiritual growth often requires movement before certainty. God is not withholding information to frustrate you. He is inviting you to trust His character rather than His timeline. The test is whether you can remain faithful without immediate confirmation. Another layer of this test involves restraint. Sometimes the most powerful response is not action, but waiting with intention. Not passive waiting, but attentive waiting. Waiting that listens. Waiting that prepares. Waiting that does not grow bitter or impatient. Heaven watches how you wait just as closely as how you move. There may also be a test of focus. Distractions will attempt to pull your attention away from what you sense today. A noise will try to dilute significance. This is not accidental. When a moment matters, it is often followed by opportunities to forget it. The test is whether you will protect what was stirred or allow it to fade into the background. This test is not meant to isolate you, but it may feel personal because it is. God deals with individuals uniquely. What He asks of you in this moment may not look impressive to others, but it is meaningful to Him. Alignment is not about visibility, it is about faithfulness. There is also a test of humility embedded here. Will you remain teachable? Will you allow your understanding to grow rather than insisting on immediate answers? Pride rushes to conclusions. Humility stays open. Heaven responds to humility because it creates space for guidance. You may feel a quiet internal tension, a sense that something is being asked of you even if you cannot yet name it. The tension is not pressure, it is awareness forming. Do not rush to resolve it. Let it guide you toward reflection rather than reaction. The test is not timed by urgency but by readiness. This moment also tests your willingness to release what no longer serves your growth. Old patterns, old assumptions, old fears may surface simply to be acknowledged and released. God does not remove things without your consent. He invites you to let go. The test is whether you will cling to familiarity or step toward freedom. It is important to remember that failing this test does not mean rejection. God is patient and merciful, but passing it brings momentum. It allows clarity to unfold more smoothly. It positions you to receive direction without confusion. This test is not about earning favor. It is about aligning with it. As you sit with this message, notice where you feel resistance and where you feel peace. Resistance often highlights areas of growth. Peace often confirms alignment. Both are valuable. Neither should be ignored. This test is not meant to be feared. It is meant to be understood. You are not being examined harshly. You are being invited deeper. God does not test to disqualify. He tests to prepare. What comes next in this message will reveal what begins to shift when you choose alignment, what changes internally, what opens externally, and how your simple yes can initiate movement you could not create on your own. This test is the doorway. What lies beyond it is shaped by how you respond now. When you say yes to God, even quietly, even imperfectly, something begins to shift almost immediately. It may not always show up as an external miracle at first, but there is an undeniable movement in the spiritual realm. Alignment activates motion. Heaven does not wait for grand gestures. It responds to sincere agreement. Your yes is not measured by volume, but by intention. And when intention aligns with obedience, doors begin to move that you could not open on your own. The first thing that happens when you say yes is internal recalibration. Confusion starts to loosen its grip. The constant mental noise that once competed for your attention begins to fade. This does not mean all questions disappear, but it means they no longer dominate you. Peace begins to take up more space. Not the kind of peace that avoids reality, but the kind that steadies you within it. That peace is a sign that alignment has begun. Next comes discernment. When you say yes, your sensitivity sharpens. You begin to recognize what drains you versus what strengthens you. Conversations, environments, habits, things that once felt neutral may now feel heavy or out of place. This is not judgment. It is clarity. Heaven adjusts your awareness so that you can walk forward without unnecessary weight. Then comes movement around you. Subtle at first. Delays that once frustrated you begin to make sense. Certain doors remain closed, but they no longer feel like rejection. Instead, they feel like redirection. At the same time, new openings appear, not always obvious opportunities, but moments of insight, confirmation, or connection that guide your next step. This is how God leads, progressively, not abruptly. Another shift that happens when you say yes is the release of pressure. You may have been carrying responsibility that was never yours to hold. Alignment redistributes weight. What belongs to you becomes clearer. What does not belong to you begins to fall away. This is why obedience often feels lighter, even when it requires courage. There is also protection released with your yes. When you align with God's direction, you come under His covering in a more intentional way. This does not mean challenges vanish, but it does mean resistance loses authority. What once intimidated you begins to shrink. What once confused you becomes manageable. Heaven does not remove every obstacle. It empowers you to walk through them without fear. You may notice emotional healing beginning in unexpected places. Old disappointments lose their sharpness. Regret softens. Hope resurfaces, not as wishful thinking, but as quiet confidence. That confidence does not come from knowing the outcome, it comes from trusting the guide. Your yes also activates timing. Things that were out of sync begin to align. You meet people at the right moment. You hear the right word at the right time. You find yourself in the right place without forcing it. This is not coincidence. This is coordination. Heaven is very precise when alignment is present. It is important to understand that saying yes does not mean everything becomes easy. Growth still requires faith. Movement still requires courage. But the struggle changes. You are no longer fighting confusion. You are learning to walk in clarity. You are no longer striving for control. You are practicing trust. When you say yes, you also give God permission to reveal the next layer. He does not overwhelm you with the full picture. He gives you what you need for the next step. And with each step taken in faith, confidence grows. This is how destiny unfolds, incrementally, relationally, intentionally. Some people wait for certainty before they commit. But those who move with God learn that certainty is often a result of commitment, not a prerequisite. Your yes today prepares you for understanding tomorrow. It builds spiritual momentum that cannot be manufactured through effort alone. Before moving forward, this is another moment to mark what has been released. Taught by SAYYS in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 842 is now activated. Let this moment settle. What you have just heard is not the end. It is the turning point. And what comes next will reveal how this yes begins to reshape your path in ways you did not expect. Hold on. What comes next changes everything. As you step into this yes, understand this. Obedience does not end with you. It multiplies through you. When God lights a flame in one heart, He intends it to become a beacon for many. I hear the Spirit saying, what you release in obedience, I will release in increase. Every act of support becomes seed in holy ground, turning this message into a river that reaches souls still waiting for confirmation. This is not about giving to a channel. This is about partnering with heaven's assignment. Act now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on screen. I speak blessing over every giver. May your obedience return as protection, clarity, and open doors. Move now, and let your response become part of God's greater harvest. Every divine invitation carries two sides, promise and warning. Not a warning rooted in fear, but one grounded in truth. This message is not only about what happens when you respond, it is also about what can happen when you ignore, delay, or dismiss what heaven is placing before you. God's invitations are always loving, but they are also purposeful, and purpose requires response. The warning embedded in this message is subtle because it respects your free will. God does not force obedience. He does not chase you with pressure. Instead, He presents opportunity and watches what you do with it. Ignoring a divine nudge does not mean immediate loss, but it often leads to unnecessary delay. What could move forward smoothly begins to stall. What could unfold clearly becomes clouded. Not because God withdraws, but because alignment was postponed. Many people misunderstand delay. They assume that waiting always means patience. But there is a difference between waiting on God and God waiting on you. This message marks a moment where heaven has already leaned forward. The question is whether you will lean back toward it or remain still. Stillness can be holy, but stagnation quietly drains momentum. The warning here is not about punishment. It is about mistiming. There are seasons that return, and there are moments that do not. February 8 represents a window, not a threat. Windows are meant to be opened. When left unopened too long, they eventually close, not in anger, but in progression. Heaven continues moving, and alignment determines whether you move with it. Another part of this warning involves familiarity. When messages like this are encountered repeatedly without response, they can lose impact. The heart becomes accustomed to hearing without engaging. This dulling is not sudden. It happens gradually. What once stirred conviction becomes background noise. And that is one of the most effective ways momentum is lost. Not through rebellion, but through neglect. God's mercy is patient, but it is not passive. He continues to invite, but he also honors choice. When a message is clearly recognized and consistently ignored, the responsibility shifts. Not because God stops caring, but because he respects your decision. The warning is this: do not confuse mercy with indifference. Heaven cares deeply about your response. There is also a warning against distraction. After moments of clarity, distractions often increase. Responsibilities, doubts, opinions, and noise compete for your attention. These are not always harmful on their own, but they become harmful when they crowd out reflection. This is why it is important to anchor what you have heard before moving on. Anchored truth withstands distraction. Ignoring this message does not mean your life will fall apart, but it may mean walking a longer road to reach what could have been closer. It may mean learning lessons through repetition instead of progression. God redeems all paths, but not all paths are equal in ease or clarity. Now, this is also the moment to choose engagement intentionally. If you are hearing this and recognizing its weight, do not remain silent. Engagement is not about visibility, it is about decision. This is where I invite you to act in a way that marks alignment. Like this message if it resonates, because agreement strengthens awareness. Share it with someone who may need confirmation, because obedience multiplies impact. Subscribe to this channel if you feel connected to this flow, because what is unfolding here is continuous, not isolated. And leave a comment declaring your alignment. Your words matter more than you realize. These actions are not random. They are outward expressions of an inward response. They help solidify decision and prevent distraction from erasing significance. When you engage, you are choosing not to let this moment fade. This warning is not meant to create urgency driven by fear, but urgency guided by wisdom. Wisdom recognizes when a moment matters. Wisdom does not procrastinate clarity. Wisdom listens and responds. There is still grace here, still invitation, still openness. But there is also truth. Repeated hesitation eventually shapes habit, and habit shapes direction. This is why God brings awareness now, before habit has time to harden. If you feel resistance rising as you hear this, pause. Resistance often signals importance. It does not mean rejection. It means decision is required. Do not rush past that feeling. Sit with it. Let it guide you toward honesty rather than avoidance. This part of the message is meant to wake discernment, not fear. You are not being threatened. You are being trusted. Trusted with awareness. Trusted with choice. Trusted with timing. What comes next will not focus on warning but on promise. On what is attached to this date. On what heaven has prepared for those who respond. And on how this moment becomes a turning point rather than a missed opportunity. Stay with this, What is coming next brings clarity to what February 8 truly represents, and why responding now changes the path ahead in ways you may not yet see. February 8 is not just a date on a calendar. It represents a spiritual marker. In the divine realm, certain moments carry assignments attached to them, and this day stands as one of those moments. It is a point of transition, a hinge between what has been delayed and what is now being released. The promise attached to February 8 is not vague encouragement. It is directional clarity. It marks the shift from waiting to walking. A promise in the spiritual sense is not merely something God intends to do for you. It is something He invites you to step into. Promises require positioning. They unfold when alignment beats timing. February 8 signals that timing has aligned. What hath been forming quietly, what has been protected and prepared, is now ready to move forward in visible ways. This promise carries the theme of forward motion. Stagnation breaks here, not all at once, and not without effort, but decisively. You may have felt like you were circling the same questions, the same delays, the same internal battles. February 8 marks the end of that cycle. The promise is not that challenges disappear, but that progress begins. Movement replaces repetition. Another layer of this promise is clarity. God does not lead His people blindly. He leads them progressively. What was once confusing begins to organize itself. Pieces that felt disconnected start to align. Decisions that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. This clarity does not come from external answers alone. It comes from internal confidence that grows as you move forward in trust. February 8 also carries the promise of favor, not favoritism, but alignment-based favor. Favor is the result of being in the right place at the right time, with the right posture. It opens doors that effort alone could not open. It brings support where resistance once dominated. It does not remove responsibility, but it multiplies effectiveness. This is also a promise of restoration. Not necessarily restoration of everything you lost, but restoration of what matters most: peace, confidence, direction, and hope. Some losses were not punishments. They were redirections. February 8 marks the point where you begin to see why certain things had to fall away in order to make room for what is coming. There is a promise here of renewed strength. You may not feel energized yet, but weariness will not define this next season. Strength returns as purpose becomes clear. When you know why you are moving, endurance increases. This promise does not eliminate effort, but it makes effort meaningful rather than draining. February 8 also marks a promise of answered prayer, though not always in the way you originally expected. Some answers come as open doors. Others come as closed ones that protect you. Still others come as peace about decisions that once caused anxiety. God answers in ways that sustain growth, not just provide relief. This promise is deeply connected to obedience. Obedience does not earn the promise. It activates it. God's promises are not transactional. They are relational. When you move in alignment, you experience what has already been prepared. February 8 signals that preparation has been completed. What remains is participation. Another aspect of this promise is acceleration, but not haste. Acceleration means that what once took excessive effort now flows more naturally. You are no longer fighting resistance at every turn. Progress becomes smoother because alignment removes unnecessary friction. This is why timing matters. Acceleration without alignment leads to burnout. Alignment brings sustainable momentum. You may notice changes in how you perceive your own capacity. Things that once felt intimidating begin to feel possible. This is not arrogance. It is confidence rooted in trust. The promise attached to this date includes courage, not reckless courage, but steady assurance that you are not moving alone. February 8 also serves as a marker you can return to mentally. When doubts arise, you can remember this moment. When progress feels slow, you can remember that movement has already begun. Markers matter because they anchor faith during uncertainty. This is one of those anchors. The promise is not abstract. It will unfold in practical ways, through decisions, conversations, opportunities, and inner shifts. Pay attention to what opens naturally rather than what requires force. God's promises are often confirmed by peace, not pressure. As this message continues, the final pieces will come together. The protection, the response, the alignment, the warding, and now the promise. They are all part of a single movement. What remains is understanding how this promise is covered, strengthened, and sustained as you move forward. The next part will reveal the angelic covering being released in this season, and how that covering supports you as you step into what February 8 has unlocked. As you step into what February 8 has unlocked, it is important to understand that movement does not happen without covering. Heaven never releases direction without also releasing protection. This is where the angelic covering surrounding you becomes especially significant. What is unfolding now is not left exposed. It is guarded, reinforced, and sustained by divine oversight. Angelic covering is not abstract symbolism. It is active support in the spiritual realm that influences outcomes in the natural one. When God assigns movement, He also assigns guardianship. This covering does not remove all challenges, but it limits their reach. It ensures that resistance cannot exceed its boundaries. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel contained. You are no longer standing alone in transition. This covering operates in multiple ways. One of the most noticeable is protection from unnecessary interference. Not every obstacle needs to be confronted directly. Some are quietly restrained before they ever reach you. Conversations that could have derailed you never happen. Distractions that once consumed your energy lose their appeal. This is not coincidence. It is containment. Heaven is filtering what reaches you so that you can focus on what matters most. Another aspect of this covering is strength. Not physical strength, but emotional and spiritual resilience. You may still face pressure, but it will not drain you the way it once did. You recover more quickly. You process more clearly. You are less reactive and more discerning. This resilience is a sign that support is present. When angels are assigned, they do not replace your effort, they reinforce it. There is also protection over your decisions. As you move forward, you may notice an increased clarity about what to accept and what to decline. Discernment sharpens under covering. You become more sensitive to misalignment and more confident in setting boundaries. This is not isolation, it is wisdom. Heaven protects direction by helping you avoid what would distract from it. This angelic covering also guards your peace. Peace is one of the first things attacked during transition. Doubt, second-guessing, and fear often try to resurface when progress begins. But under this covering, peace becomes more stable. You may still feel uncertainty, but it does not control you. You are able to move forward without constant internal conflict. The stability is not self-generated. It is supported. It is important to understand that this covering does not make you invulnerable. It makes you supported. Vulnerability is part of growth, but support ensures that vulnerability leads to development rather than defeat. Heaven allows growth without allowing destruction. That balance is intentional. You may also notice a shift in how opposition shows up. Instead of feeling personal and intense, it may feel distant or ineffective. What once discouraged you no longer lands the same way. This does not mean opposition disappears. It means it loses influence. That loss of influence is a sign that authority has shifted. Another layer of this covering is guidance. Angels are not only protectors, they are messengers. They respond to God's direction and help align circumstances accordingly. This can show up as timely insight, unexpected help, or a sense of inner knowing that guides your steps. Guidance does not always arrive dramatically. Often it comes quietly, through peace rather than pressure. This covering also extends to endurance. Transition can be tiring, even when it is positive. Angelic support sustains you so that you do not burn out mid-movement. You are given enough strength for each step, not the entire journey at once. This keeps you dependent, attentive, and grounded. It is also worth noting that this covering responds to alignment. As you continue to respond honestly and intentionally, support remains active. Heaven does not withdraw quickly. It remains engaged as long as you remain responsive. This is not conditional love. It is relational movement. God walks with you, not ahead of you without regard for your pace. There may be moments when you do not feel covered. Feelings are not always reliable indicators of spiritual reality. Covering operates whether you sense it or not. Trust is built when you continue forward even without constant reassurance. And often, reassurance comes later, when you look back and see what did not touch you, what did not derail you, what did not destroy you. This angelic covering is not meant to elevate you above others. It is meant to carry you through what you have been assigned. Assignment always comes with support. God does not send without sustaining. As you prepare for the final part of this message, let this truth settle. You are not stepping into this new season unguarded. Heaven is actively involved. Protection is in place. Strength is being supplied. Guidance is available. The final part will bring everything together: assurance, closure, and a reminder of who you are in God's eyes. What has begun will be sealed with peace, purpose, and hope. As this message comes to a close, it is important to understand one final truth. Heaven does not speak a name casually, and God does not watch closely without intention. Everything you have heard up to this point has been leading here, not to pressure you, but to reassure you. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not misunderstood by God. This moment exists because heaven has been involved with your life far longer than you realized. What you are experiencing now is not the end of a message, but the sealing of one. Awareness has been given. Alignment has been invited. Protection has been released. Promise has been revealed. And now assurance is placed over you. Assurance that you are seen clearly by God. Assurance that your questions do not disqualify you. Assurance that your willingness matters more than your certainty. God does not call the most confident. He calls the most responsive. And your presence here is already a response. Even listening all the way through is an act of openness. Heaven measures faith differently than humans do. God looks at the heart that keeps turning toward Him, even when unsure. That posture has been evident in your life, and that is why this moment exists. This message is not meant to leave you anxious about doing everything right. It is meant to leave you grounded in trust. Trust that God knows how to guide you step by step. Trust that you are not required to force outcomes. Trust that obedience unfolds naturally when relationship is prioritized. God is not asking you to run ahead. He is asking you to walk with Him. You may still have unanswered questions after this, but is okay. Faith does not eliminate questions. It teaches you how to carry them without fear. You are allowed to grow gradually. You are allowed to learn as you move. God does not rush maturity. He nurtures it. As you move forward from this moment, remember that peace is your confirmation. Not excitement alone. Not emotion alone. Peace. When peace remains, alignment is present. When peace fades, pause and listen again. God is patient with process. He is invested in your growth, not just your arrival. This is also a reminder that you are not required to explain this moment to anyone else. Some experiences are meant to be held quietly, allowed to shape you internally before they are ever spoken externally. Let this message do its work beneath the surface. Fruit grows in hidden places first. Heaven's involvement in your life is not seasonal, it is consistent. This moment simply made it visible. And visibility brings responsibility, yes, but it also brings comfort. You are not navigating your future blindly. You are walking with a God who already sees the full path. Before we close, this is the final moment to mark what has been spoken and sealed. Type "I receive God's direction" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 931 is now activated. Let that be your declaration, not of perfection, but of trust. Not of control, but of surrender. Not of fear, but of faith. Take a breath here. Feel the steadiness that comes with knowing you are not alone. What unfolds from this point forward will do so in layers, but you will recognize them when they come. And when doubt tries to speak, you will remember this moment. The moment you realized heaven knew your name. You are covered. You are guided. You are seen. And you are moving forward, not by force, but by faith. As this message settles into your spirit, hear this as a final charge. What God places in you is meant to flow through you. This word does not end here. It is meant to reach hearts that are still waiting for confirmation. I am speaking to you directly now, because your obedience can become someone else's answered prayer. God is saying, what you release into my work, I will release back into your life in multiplied measure. This mission moves by faith, and faith moves through action. Support this work now through Super Thanks channel membership, or the PayPal donation link in the description or the QR code you see on screen. I bless every giver with open doors, divine covering, and peace that confirms obedience. Act now, partner with heaven, and let your response become part of God's living testimony.